The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by any species. It floated in the empty space between 3 star systems, a massive sphere of crystal and metal where representatives from 1,000 worlds came to talk, to argue, and to decide the fate of the galaxy. Light from distant stars shone through the transparent walls, making the whole chamber glow like a jewel. On this day, every seat was filled. The air was thick with the sounds of alien languages, clicks and whistles and growls of species who had traveled between the stars for millions of years. At the center of the room, raised on a platform of polished black stone, sat the 5 greatest empires. The Corvani Dominion with their scales and cold eyes, the Velith Empire with their 4 arms and cruel smiles, the Trilaxian Collective with their hive mind consciousness, and others, each one ancient, each one powerful. Each one looking down at the smaller species with barely hidden contempt, and at the very edge of the room, almost hidden in shadow, sat the human delegation. Ambassador Lee Hanna was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes. She had served as humanity's voice in this chamber for 15 years, and in all that time, she had never raised her voice. She listened. She nodded. She accepted whatever terms were offered. The other species had long ago stopped paying attention to her today. However, was different. The Corvani ambassador rose from his seat. His name was Vexinar, and he was known throughout the galaxy as a being who enjoyed causing pain. His scales were dark green, almost black, and when he smiled, rows of sharp teeth gleamed in the starlight. "The Dominion has a proposal," he announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. "For too long, the outer regions have been unstable. Pirates raid our shipping lanes. Rebels hide in uncontrolled systems. This chaos threatens galactic stability." He paused, letting his words sink in. Then his cold eyes turned toward the human delegation. "The Dominion demands that humanity surrender 3 of their core worlds. Kepler 4 for 2b, Proxima Centauri 4, and New Sol. These worlds will be placed under Corvani protection to ensure peace and order." Murmur ran through the chamber. Some species nodded in approval. Others looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to object. The Velith ambassador leaned back in his chair and smiled. He had made similar demands of humanity just 50 years ago, and the humans had complied without resistance. Everyone expected the same result today. In the shadows, Admiral Kim Tae-ho watched from the observation gallery above the main floor. He was 73 years old, with white hair and a face carved by decades of military service. Beside him stood Captain Park Yuna, 30 years younger. Her hands clasped behind her back so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. "They're going to take more worlds," she whispered. "Just like they took mine." Ho said nothing. His eyes were fixed on Ambassador Lee. On the floor below, the Corvani ambassador spread his arms wide. "Humanity has 1 cycle to agree. If they refuse, the Dominion will consider it an act of war." He smiled again, all teeth. And we all know how that would end. Laughter rippled through the chamber. The Velith ambassador chuckled. Even some of the smaller species joined in, nervous and eager to please their masters. The laughter died when Lee Hanna stood up. She moved slowly, carefully, as if she had all the time in the universe. She reached up and removed the small translation device from her ear. She set it on the table in front of her. Then she folded her hands behind her back and looked directly at Vexinar. The chamber fell silent. In 300 years of galactic politics, no human representative had ever removed their translator. It was a sign of disrespect so profound that most species could not even comprehend it. "We decline," Lee Hanna said. Her voice was soft, but somehow it filled the entire hall. Vexinar blinked. For a moment, he seemed confused, as if he had heard wrong. "What did you say?" "I said, we decline your proposal. We will not surrender our worlds. We will not pay your tribute. We will not bow." The Corvani ambassador's confusion turned to anger. His scales darkened, and his tail lashed behind him. "You dare refuse the Dominion? You are nothing. Your species is young and weak. Your ships are few. Your soldiers are soft." "Yes," Lee Hanna agreed. That is what you believe. It is what we know. Vexenar roared. You have no allies. No empire will stand with you. If you refuse our demands, we will burn your worlds. We will scatter your people across the void. We will make an example of your species that will be remembered for 1,000,000 years. Lehanna listened to his threats without expression. When he finished, she nodded slightly, as if considering his words. Then she smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible. But something about it made Vexenar hesitate. Something about the look in her eyes made him feel, for the first time in his long life, uncertain. Ambassador Vexenar, she said quietly, your dominion has existed for 40,000 years. In that time, you have conquered 1,100 species. You have destroyed worlds. You have built an empire on the suffering of others. She took a step forward, and somehow that single step seemed to change everything. The shadows around the human delegation seemed deeper now. The starlight seemed colder. Humanity has existed for 300,000 years, she continued. And in that time, we have done things to each other that would make your ancestors weep. We have survived ice ages that froze our world solid. We have survived plagues that killed half our population. We have survived wars that burned entire continents. Her smile widened, and there was nothing warm in it. You think you know what war means? You think you understand what it is to fight for survival. But you have never faced a species that spent 100,000 years learning how to kill each other before they ever reached for the stars. She turned to address the entire chamber, her voice rising for the first time. To all species who have wronged humanity, to the Velith who took our colonies, to the Corvani who demanded our worlds, to everyone who laughed at us, cheated us, and treated us like prey. She paused, and in that moment of silence, every being in the chamber felt something they had never felt before. Fear, pure, cold, ancient fear. We remember everything, and our patience has finally run out. Up in the observation gallery, Admiral Kimteho allowed himself a small smile. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a communication device. He pressed a single button. On the dark side of Neptune, 12,000 warships received the signal. Engines powered up. Weapon systems came online. Crews moved to battle stations, and the galaxy, for the first time in its long history, began to understand what it meant to wake a sleeping predator. The message reached every corner of the galaxy at the same moment. It traveled through communication relays, bounced off satellites, and echoed through the command centers of 1,000 worlds. The voice belonged to Fleet Commander Cho Seung-jin, and his words were simple. All species who have harmed human citizens, stolen human worlds, or threatened human sovereignty, you have one standard cycle to return what you have taken. After that, we take it back ourselves. On the Corvani homeworld, High General Brixdale listened to the message and laughed. He was old, even by Corvani standards, and he had fought in dozens of wars. He had crushed rebellions, destroyed fleets, and brought entire species to their knees. The idea that humans could threaten the Dominion was absurd. Send word to Theta Station, he ordered. Tell them to prepare for visitors. When the humans come, capture their ships intact. I want to study their technology before we destroy them. Theta Station was a military outpost at the edge of Corvani space. It held 40,000 troops, 200 fighter craft, and enough weapons to destroy a small moon. It had never been successfully attacked in the 500 years since it was built. Lieutenant T-Wan looked at the station through the viewport of her assault ship. She was 28 years old, with short black hair and steady hands. She had never seen real combat before. None of her soldiers had. For 300 years, humanity's military had trained in secret, preparing for a war that most people hoped would never come. Now it was here. All units, check your gear, she said quietly. Around her, 200 soldiers moved with calm efficiency. They wore black armor that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Their weapons were sleek and simple. It's designed for close combat in the tight corridors of a space station. The Corvani expected human soldiers to be weak. They expected slow reflexes, poor coordination, and primitive tactics. They had studied human history and seen only a young species that had spent most of its existence fighting itself. They had not understood. What that really meant? Seconds to breach, the pilot announced, G1. Closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about her grandmother, who had died in a Velith labor camp when Jawan was 5. She thought about her father, who had spent his whole life building ships in secret, knowing he would never live to see them fly. She thought about everyone who had waited and planned and hoped for this day. For Earth, she whispered. For Earth, her soldiers repeated. The assault ship slammed into the station's hull, cutting beams carved through metal. The airlock blew inward, and the humans poured through like water through a broken dam. The Corvani had never seen anything like it. Human soldiers moved through their station like ghosts, appearing from nowhere and vanishing before the defenders could react. They did not fight in neat formations like other species. They fought in pairs and small groups, covering each other, adapting to every situation with terrifying speed. The station's commander, a veteran named Zorvik, tried to organize a defense. He sent his best troops to hold the central corridor. They were dead within minutes. He called for fighter support, but the human ships outside had already destroyed the launch bays. He activated the emergency protocols, but the station's systems were being hacked faster than his technicians could respond. In the chaos, no one noticed the small woman in a plain uniform who moved through the lower levels. Her name was Beek Minji, and she was not a soldier. She was an intelligence officer. She had spent 20 years preparing for this moment. While the battle raged above, Minji plugged a small device into the station's main computer. Lines of code flashed across her screen. Within seconds, she had access to everything troop movements, communication codes, supply schedules, and the locations of every Corvani military base in this sector. Package acquired, she said into her communicator. Transmitting now. On the bridge of humanity's flagship, Admiral Kim Tae-ho watched the data stream across his displays. His officers worked in focused silence, absorbing information that would have taken their ancestors years to gather. Station defenses are down, Captain Park Yuna reported. Lieutenant Kong's team is approaching the command center. Tae-ho nodded. What's our time? 15 minutes since breach. 15 minutes. The Corvani had expected the battle to last for days. They had prepared for a siege. Instead, they were being overrun. On Theta Station, Lieutenant Kang Juan kicked open the door to the command center. Inside, she found the station commander surrounded by his last guards. They raised their weapons, but they were too slow. Her soldiers moved like dancers, each motion flowing into the next. And in 3 seconds, every guard was on the floor. Zorvik stared at her with wide eyes. This is impossible, he whispered. You are prey. You are weak. Our ancestors hunted species like you for sport. Guan walked toward him slowly. She removed her helmet, letting him see her human face, the soft skin, the small teeth, the eyes that should have belonged to a creature born to flee. Your ancestors hunted prey, she agreed. They hunted animals that ran when they saw a predator. She leaned close and her voice dropped to a whisper. Humans don't run. We never have. We never will. The station fell in 18 minutes. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. A Corvani military outpost, one of the most heavily defended positions in the Dominion, had been captured by humans. 40,000 troops had been defeated by fewer than 3,000. It was impossible. It was unthinkable, and it was only the beginning. In the council chamber, the great empires demanded explanations. Where had these ships come from? Where had humans learned to fight like this? How had such a young species developed technology that could match the ancient powers? No one had answers. No one had suspected. For 300 years, humanity had built in secret. They had constructed shipyards beneath the ice of Europa, hidden bases in the asteroid belt, training facilities on the dark side of the moon. They had studied every species, learned every weakness, and prepared for the day when they would no longer have to bow. That day had come, Admiral. Kim Tae-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked out at the stars. Behind him, his fleet stretched across space like a river of steel and fire. Ahead lay the colonies that had been stolen from humanity, the worlds where millions of humans still lived under alien rule. "Set course for the Veleth border," he ordered. "It's time to bring our people home." The galaxy had watched humanity crawl for 3 centuries. Now they would watch humanity stand. And they would learn, too late, that the most dangerous predator is not the one that hunts openly, it is the one that waits. The colony world of New Busan had been under Veleth control for 63 years. The humans who lived there had learned to keep their heads down, to speak quietly, and to never look their masters in the eye. They worked in the mines and the factories. They grew food they were not allowed to eat. They watched their children taken away to serve in Veleth households. And they said nothing because speaking meant death. On the morning, the sky filled with human warships. An old woman named Seo Yunji was walking to her work shift at the processing plant. She was 71 years old, and she had not seen a free human since she was 8. She had almost forgotten what hope felt like. She heard the sound first, a deep rumble that shook the ground beneath her feet. She looked up and saw them. Hundreds of ships, sleek and dark, descending through the clouds like falling stars. Each one carried the symbol of Earth on its hull, a simple blue circle on a field of black. The Veleth garrison reacted quickly. Alarms screamed across the colony. Soldiers poured out of their barracks, weapons ready. Defense towers powered up, preparing to fire on the incoming ships. They never got the chance. The human ships did not attack the colony. Instead, they landed around it, forming a perfect circle. Dropships fell from the larger vessels, and soldiers emerged. Human soldiers. Wearing the black armor that had become famous across the galaxy in just a few short weeks, Captain Park Yuna led the ground team. She had requested this assignment personally. New Busan was not her homeworld, but her mother was here, somewhere in this colony of broken people. She had not seen her mother in 31 years. "All units, weapons tight," she ordered. "These are our people. No one fires unless fired upon." The Veleth commander was smart enough to see the situation clearly. His garrison numbered 2,000. The human force surrounding the colony was 10 times that size. He ordered his soldiers to stand down. Within an hour, the Veleth flag came down. The human flag rose in its place. EUNG stood in the crowd that gathered in the colony's central square. All around her, people wept openly. Children who had only heard stories about Earth stared at the human soldiers with wide eyes. Old men who had spent their lives in chains fell to their knees. Yuna walked through the crowd, searching every face. The intelligence report said her mother was still alive, but reports could be wrong. So much time had passed. So many things could have happened. Then she saw her. The woman was thin. Her hair completely white. Her hands rough from decades of labor. But Yuna would have known those eyes anywhere. They were her mother's eyes. They were her own eyes. "Iyama," she whispered. Her mother looked at her without recognition for a long moment. Then understanding dawned. Her face crumpled, and she reached out with trembling hands. "My little Yuna." They held each other in the middle of the square, while the colony celebrated around them. Neither of them could speak. There were no words for 31 years of separation. There were no words for the pain, the loss, and the hope that had finally, possibly come true. Scenes like this played out across 8 worlds in the following weeks. Human forces moved through Veleth and Corvani space like a wave, liberating every colony, freeing every prisoner. They found humans who had been born in captivity and had never seen Earth. They found old records of families torn apart and worked to reunite them. They found mass graves and memorial sites, and they recorded everything. The galaxy watched in growing horror. Admiral Kim Taeho led the main fleet deeper into Corvani territory, always one step ahead of the enemy's defenses. Intelligence officer Beek Minji fed him information, constantly troop movements, supply lines, the locations of hidden bases. The data she had stolen from Theta Station was paying dividends. Beyond anyone's expectations, the Corvani High Command responded by assembling the largest fleet in their history, 300 capital ships, each one capable of destroying a planet, thousands of support vessels, millions of soldiers. They called it the Grand Fleet. Its mission was simple: destroy, It's the human threat once and for all. The two forces met in the empty space between star systems. Far from any world that could be harmed by the battle, the Corvani fleet formed a wall of steel and fire, weapons charged, shields at maximum. Their commander, Admiral Vextral, was confident. Numbers were on his side. History was on his side. He did not know that Vice Admiral Odewan had studied Corvani tactics for 40 years. The human fleet approached in a standard formation exactly as the Corvani expected. Then, at the moment of engagement, everything changed. Human ships scattered in what appeared to be chaos. The Corvani sensors struggled to track so many targets moving in so many directions. By the time they realized it was a coordinated maneuver, it was too late. The human fleet reformed behind and around the Corvani position. What had been a head-on battle became an encirclement. The Grand Fleet, the pride of the Dominion, found itself trapped. All ships, weapons free, Vice Admiral Lowe ordered. The battle lasted for hours. When it ended, the Corvani Grand Fleet had ceased to exist. Of 300 capital ships, only 11 survived to surrender. Admiral Vextral was not among the survivors. The news reached the Galactic Council before the debris had. They finished cooling. For the first time in recorded history, the great powers of the galaxy faced an enemy they could not intimidate, could not buy, and could not defeat. Emergency sessions were called. Old rivals met in secret. Species that had not spoken in centuries found common cause. If humanity could destroy the Corvani Grand Fleet, what would stop them from conquering the galaxy? The answer, they decided, was unity. For the first time ever, the great empires would set aside their differences. They would combine their fleets, pool their resources, and work together toward a single goal: the destruction of humanity. They called themselves the Coalition of Galactic Stability. Their combined forces numbered over 200,000 ships, the largest military alliance in galactic history. They believed this overwhelming force would be enough. They were wrong, but they would not understand just how wrong until it was far too late. The Coalition of Galactic Stability gathered its forces at the edge of human space. 200,000 ships from 6 great empires stretched across the void like an ocean of metal and light. The Corvani had sent every vessel they had left. The Velith had emptied their shipyards. The Trilaxians had awakened their ancient war drones from thousand-year slumbers. Even the Morvani, who had not fought a war in 10 generations, had sent their entire fleet. This was not just a military operation. It was an execution. The Coalition's commander, Supreme Admiral Corvath of the Velith Empire, looked at the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Their intelligence said the humans had perhaps 30,000 ships. Good ships, yes. Dangerous ships. But 30,000 against 200,000 was not a battle. It was mathematics. We move in 3 cycles, he announced to his assembled commanders. Our target is Earth itself. We will burn their homeworld to ash, and the rest of their territory will collapse. In the council chamber, Ambassador Lee Hanna received the Coalition's declaration of war. She read it carefully, her expression never changing. The document was long and formal, filled with legal language about galactic stability and the need to contain aggressive species. When she finished, she smiled. "Thank you for making this simple," she said to the Coalition's diplomatic envoy. "Now, we don't have to hunt you one by one." The envoy, a Trilaxian named Syrinx, felt a chill run through his collective consciousness. He had expected fear. He had expected desperation. He had expected the humans to beg for mercy. He had not expected that smile. The Coalition fleet began its advance toward Earth. They moved slowly, carefully, their sensors sweeping space for any sign of human defenses. They expected ambushes, traps, desperate last stands. They were prepared for everything, except for what they found. Nothing. The outer reaches of human space were empty. The colonies they passed were abandoned. The defense stations were offline. It was as if humanity had simply vanished. "They're running," one of the Corvani admirals said with contempt. "They know they cannot win." Supreme Admiral Corvath was not so sure. Something about this felt wrong. Humans did not run. The The battles of the past weeks had proven that beyond any doubt. So where were they? The answer came when the Coalition fleet reached the Sol system. Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, beautiful and fragile. Its orbital stations were silent. Its defense platforms were dark. The planet itself seemed untwent. It was a trap. Everyone knew it was a trap. But the Coalition had no choice. This was their moment of victory. If they retreated now, their alliance would collapse. The great empires could not show weakness. They entered the system. The first sign of trouble was a ripple in space itself. It started at the edge of the system and spread inward like a wave on water. Sensors flickered. Communications became fuzzy. And then, one by one, faster-than-light drives on every Coalition ship went offline. Supreme Admiral Corbath stared at his tactical display in disbelief. What is happening? His science officer's voice was barely steady. Unknown energy field, Admiral. It appears to be collapsing local faster-than-light physics. We cannot jump. We cannot retreat. It's impossible. Such technology does not exist. It does now, Admiral. Dr. Shinari watched from her control room on Luna Base as her creation did exactly what it was designed to do. She had spent 30 years developing the Silence Field, a device that could temporarily suspend faster-than-light travel in a localized area. The physics were complex, the engineering was revolutionary, and the result was simple. The Coalition fleet was trapped, then the human. Ships appeared. They emerged from behind moons and asteroids, from hidden bases on Titan and Europa, from the dark spaces between planets where no sensor could find them. 30,000 ships that the Coalition had expected, and then 30,000 more that they had not. General Yun Huan stood on the bridge of Earth's orbital command station. He was 65 years old, and he had waited his entire life for this moment. His father had been a refugee. His grandfather had died in a Velith prison. For 3 generations, his family had prepared for the day when humanity would finally strike back. All units, this is General Yun, he said, his voice calm and steady. The Coalition has entered our home. They came here to destroy us. They came here to burn our world and scatter our people. He paused, looking out at the blue curve of Earth below, show them why that was a mistake. The human fleet closed around the Coalition like a fist. Supreme Admiral Corvath tried to organize a defense, but the Coalition's strength had become its weakness. 6 different species with 6 different command structures, 6 different tactical doctrines, 6 different languages. In the chaos of sudden combat, their alliance fractured. The Corvani ships pushed forward aggressively, leaving gaps in the formation. The Velith pulled back to protect their carriers. The Trilaxian war drones followed their ancient programming and attacked anything that moved, including their allies. Human ships moved through the chaos like predators through a herd of panicked prey. They struck at weak points, exploited gaps, and vanished before the enemy could respond. Every tactic they used had been practiced 1,000 times. Every maneuver had been planned years in advance. On his flagship, Admiral Kim Tae-ho watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. There was no joy in this. Too many had suffered. Too many had died. But this was justice, long delayed, but finally delivered. Captain Park Eunice stood beside him. Her mother was safe now, on a colony world far from the fighting. Her family was whole again, and the empires that had torn them apart were burning. The Velith command ship is attempting to surrender, an officer reported. Tae-ho nodded. Accept it. Pass the word to all units. Anyone who surrenders will be treated according to the laws of war. We are not like them. We will not become like them. One by one, the Coalition ships stopped fighting. Some surrendered. Some were destroyed. Some drifted dead in space, their crews gone. Their weapons silent by the end of the 3rd week. It was over. The largest military alliance in galactic history had been broken in humanity's home system. The great empires that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years had been humbled by a species they had dismissed as prey, and now came the hardest part. Not winning the war, winning the peace The tribunal was held on Earth, in a great hall built specifically for this moment. It stood on the shores of an ocean, with walls of glass that looked out over endless blue water. Humans had always found peace near the sea. It seemed fitting that they would make peace here. The leaders of the coalition sat in rows before the tribunal stage. Supreme Admiral Corvath, the Corvani High General who had replaced Brixtel, the Trilaxian collective consciousness that had directed their war drones, and dozens of others, admirals, generals, governors, all the powerful beings who had once looked down on humanity with contempt. Now they sat in silence, their hands empty, their fleets destroyed. Waiting to learn their fate, Ambassador Lee Hanna walked to the center of the stage. She was still the same small woman, with gray hair and calm eyes. She had not changed in the months since the war began. But somehow, she seemed different now. Larger, more present. As if the universe itself had shifted to make room for her. "You came to our world to destroy us," she began. Her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the hall. "You gathered the greatest fleet in galactic history. You united empires that had been enemies for millions of years, and you did all of this because you were afraid." She paused, letting her words settle. "You were afraid of what we represented. Not our ships. Not our weapons. You were afraid of the idea of us. A young species that refused to bow. A prey animal that learned to hunt. You were afraid that if we could rise, others might follow." She walked along the edge of the stage, meeting the eyes of each coalition leader in turn. "You were right to be afraid, because now everything will change." The terms were not what the coalition expected. There were no mass executions. No planetary bombardments. No enslavement of populations. Instead, there were rules. Simple rules that would reshape the galaxy. No species would demand tribute from another. Trade would be conducted between equals, with fair prices and mutual benefit. No empire would annex unwilling worlds. Colonization would happen only with the consent of all parties. Existing populations would have rights that could not be taken away. No species would be considered lesser. The old hierarchy of prey and predator would end. In its place would be a community of equals, shared laws and shared responsibilities, and humanity would enforce these rules. Not as rulers, but as guardians. Their fleets would patrol the borders. Their soldiers would protect the weak. Their ambassadors would mediate disputes. Supreme Admiral Corvath rose to his feet. His voice was bitter. "You speak of equality, but you have just conquered us. How is this different from what we did to you?" Lee Hanna turned to face him. "It is different in one simple way. We will leave. Your ships are destroyed, but your worlds are intact. Your people are alive. Your governments will continue to function. We do not want to rule you. We never did. Then what do you want?" She smiled, and for the first time, there was warmth in it. "We want what every species wants, Admiral. We want our children to grow up without fear. We want to build and create and explore. We want to live in peace." Her smile faded, and her voice grew cold. "But we have learned that peace must be guarded, that the weak will be exploited unless the strong protect them. So we will be that protection. Not because we want power, but because no one else will do it." The tribunal ended with agreements signed and hands shaken. The coalition dispersed, its leaders returning to their homeworlds to explain their defeat and adjust to the new reality. Some would accept the changes. Others would resist. But all of them knew that resistance was futile. Humanity had proven that beyond any doubt. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to transform. Admiral Kim Taho retired from active service. He had spent his entire life preparing for war, and now he wanted to learn how to live in peace. He settled on the colony world where Captain Park Yuna's family had been reunited. He spent his days teaching young people the history of their species, not just the victories, but the suffering that had made them necessary, Captain Park. Yuna accepted a promotion to Admiral and took command of the Fourth Fleet, responsible for protecting the outer regions of the galaxy. She traveled constantly, visiting worlds that had never seen a human before. Everywhere she went, she carried the same message: you are not alone. you will not be forgotten. Intelligence Officer Beek Minji was offered a dozen positions in the new government. She declined them all. Instead, she returned to her quiet work, now focused on preventing conflicts before they started. Her network of informants and analysts grew until it covered the entire galaxy. Most species never knew she existed. That was exactly how she wanted it. Dr. Shinari continued her research. The silence field had been just the beginning. She believed there were discoveries waiting in the universe that would make faster-than-light travel look primitive. She worked quietly in her laboratory, surrounded by equations and experiments. Searching for the next breakthrough, General Yun Wan became the first commander of the Galactic Defense Initiative, a new organization that brought together species from across the galaxy to maintain peace. It was the largest cooperative effort in history, and he led it with patience and wisdom, always remembering that humanity's strength came not from their weapons, but from their will. And Ambassador Lee Hanna. She returned to the council chamber, to the seat at the edge of the room where humanity had sat in shadow for 3 centuries. But the shadows were gone now. Light streamed through the crystal walls, and when she spoke, every species listened. A year after the war ended, a memorial was built in orbit around Earth. It listed the names of every human who had died under alien oppression, millions of names, carved into walls of black stone that stretched 4 kilometers. At the entrance, there was an inscription in every language known to the galaxy. They watched us crawl. They watched us stumble. They watched us fall. They never thought to watch us remember. And across the galaxy, in 1,000 different languages, a new saying spread. Parents whispered it to their children. Teachers taught it in their schools. Leaders repeated it in their councils. Let sleeping humans lie, because the galaxy had learned what humanity had always known. Patience is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. And the most dangerous creature in the universe is not the one that attacks without warning. It is the one that waits for the right moment and remembers everything.